Hey everybody, welcome back. You know, to kick off the new year, I thought we'd take a look into the history of a franchise that a good number of you younger viewers, along with a good number of people my age, have probably never heard of. So you're probably all wondering, what the hell is Fist of the North Star? Now, the problem is, to properly explain why on earth probably a good number of you have never even heard of this series, I have to first explain what exactly this series is all about. Now, the only problem with that is, even though I read manga, I don't really consider myself qualified to critique it or properly explain it. So, instead, we're going to cut to YouTube manga reviewer Manga Matt to properly explain everything. Go ahead.
Hello again, Manga Matt here, and I'm going to be doing a summation / opinion piece on a classic manga series known as Fist of the North Star or Hokuto no Ken. The series takes place in the far future, and apparently there's been a huge nuclear war that broke out, causing all of the lakes and streams of the world to dry up, meaning there's no more available fresh water for people to drink, and the whole world has basically turned into like a desert wasteland. Now, of course, whenever precious commodities are found, and also when people start living in a desert, naturally it devolves down to the road warrior lifestyle, in which people start running around on bikes, getting mohawks, wearing a single shoulder pad on the right side of their shoulder, maybe wearing like a big metal cod piece or hockey masks for battle armor. And there is only one man who can represent law and morality in such a desolate and unsavory future, and that is none other than Kenshiro. Kenshiro is the main character of the series and the practitioner of an ancient and deadly martial arts technique known as Hokuto no Ken, which basically involves him, after years of training, being able to hit people in a precise pressure point on their body. Now, what follows then is any number of bizarre reactions that he would elicit out of the target. Most commonly, he hits them in the head or something, and then their head just explodes out of their body, or like their chest explodes and they die, or he can be more explicit, like he can hit them in the legs, and then their legs can sort of force themselves to walk backwards until they fall off a cliff, or he can, as I like, perform the Hokuto Keikoken, which basically debones your entire body out of your skin, and you're left just as a filleted entree dish, I suppose. Really great series for the action and violence, but that would mean nothing if there weren't likable characters and emotionally driven situations, which we also do have in this series. For Kenshiro is a troubled and unfortunate soul, because unfortunately he did have a love interest in his life, Julia, who was tragically taken away from him by his former best friend Shin, in sort of a Shakespearean tragedy kind of way, in which both of them were in love with her, and Shin simply could not accept that Julia loved Ken more than Shin, and so Shin proceeded to beat him up with his own special martial arts technique, the only technique that rivals the Hokuto no Ken, the Nanto Seiken, or the Southern Cross technique. Keep in mind, this was years ago when Kenshiro was not as mastered with the Hokuto no Ken as he is when we see him in the series. And so Shin took her away, and then carved into his body these 7 scars that shape the Big Dipper. And of course, as we all know, the Big Dipper then is the constellation that contains the North Star. Does this mean anything? Not really, other than the fact that from this point on, Kenshiro is referred to as the man with the 7 scars, and that's how he becomes infamous throughout the desert wasteland, is by this distinctive scarring on his chest. Now, besides that, and by the way, that whole story thread is completely ironed out in the first volume of the story, so I'm not spoiling the major plot points of the series. After that, I mean, in that first volume, it then proceeds into sort of a mundane kind of storytelling where it's Kenshiro is sort of like the Clint Eastwood character from the Fistful of Dollars trilogy. He just walks into town, sees that wrongs are being done, and then he proceeds to kick ass and take names until the wrong is righted. Now, of course, the problem with this is that Kenshiro never actually follows up on any of the good deeds that he's done, so there's no telling if the villages that he saves actually turn out well after all. But that can be overlooked because he makes people's heads explode when he touches them. Now, after... that's what she said. Now, after dealing with the Julia story, and after about 5 volumes, we actually get a more in-depth look into Kenshiro's backstory and the fact that the Fist of the North Star is actually such a powerful technique to learn that there is only one successor to the martial art per generation. And what happened was that Kenshiro's master never sired an heir, and so therefore he adopted 4 boys who he would then teach the martial art to, only one of whom could succeed in it. And unfortunately, when anyone learns the Hokuto no Ken and doesn't succeed in being the master of the technique, they don't get away just scot-free. They either kill them or they break their hands so that they can never practice the technique. And unfortunately, Kenshiro was deemed the true successor of the martial art, whereas his other brothers, Jiagi, Toki, and Rao, were deemed unfit for the title. And what follows then is in volume 5. It's revealed that Kenshiro's brothers, his adopted brothers, actually are still alive, and not only that, they are causing massive panic and havoc because they're running around with his technique and blowing people's heads apart just to rule the world and crap. And so that sort of trails off into the majority of the rest of the series, is Kenshiro slowly fighting through bad guys until he actually meets all of his brothers to take them down once and for all for the sake of humanity. Now, how does the series hold up? Amazing. You see, the way Tetsuo Hara actually draws is with a ton of shading, which is really more of like a Western kind of cartooning than manga generally has going for it. Also, there's a lot of tropes that are introduced in Hokuto no Ken that are used all through shonen manga to follow, including the idea of seeing people's aura whenever they're really angry and powerful, like in Dragon Ball Z. Also, the ripping off of the shirt to become more badass, as you see in Dragon Ball Z. Also, you have just this one scene alone where 2 people fly in the air and kick each other at the same time is iconic enough on its own. Also, the whole one thing Kenshiro does when he fights is he's always like yelling when he hits people. He's like, and that itself is borrowed from Bruce Lee, who would do that in his movies, but also prevails in later series like Dragon Ball Z, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, where there's tons of yelling when people punch each other. So it's a real testament to the impact Fist of the North Star had on its readers, and just by large manga altogether. And that's proof enough that if you can manage to get a hold of this series and read it, that you definitely should, because it's got a lot of heart, plenty of gore action, and also likable characters in a desperate and mostly hopeless situation. So I hope you enjoyed that, and Lord Fail, God help you that you have to play some of the most unappealing edges of this North Star franchise, but maybe you can get through it with a lot of help. So see ya and good luck.
Thanks for the words of encouragement. Anyway, join us next time when we cover one of the first major mishandlings of the series with its first home console release, Fist of the North Star for the NES. I'll see you next time.